Anika Ayana Henderson is an assistant professor of sexuality, women's, and gender studies at Amherst College, with affiliations in the English and Black Studies departments, as well as the Film and Media Studies program. Professor Henderson is the author of her new book, Veil and Vow, Marriage Matters in Contemporary African American Culture, published by the University of North Carolina Press. She's the recipient of numerous fellowships and awards, including the American Association of University Women Postdoctoral Research Leave Fellowship, and the Mellon Woodrow Wilson Career Enhancement Fellowship. Her classes have been featured in the New York Times and Elle Magazine. She's a native of Chicago, Illinois, and her research interests include late 20th and early 21st century African American literature and culture. Heather Ajipong works as a visual artist, performer, actor, and maker. She lives and works in London, and her art practice is concerned with mental health and well-being, invisibility, the diaspora, and the archive. Heather uses both lens-based practices and performance, with an aim culminating in a cathartic experience for both herself and viewers. She adopts the technique of reimagination to engage with communities of interest and the self as central focus within the image. She's worked within photography and performance since 2009, with a range of works that have been published, performed, and exhibited around the UK and internationally. In fact, here is one of her images on a recent book publication that we're so excited about. Heather has been nominated for the Prix Pictet and Paul Hauff Award, both in 2016 and 2018. Her work is in a number of collections, including the Mead Art Museum and the New Orleans Museum of Art, the Hyman Collection, and Autograph ABP. She's been commissioned by organizations including the Mayor of London, PhotoWorks, Artichoke, and Tate Exchange. In her television, film, and theater work, she's drawn to challenging and compelling writing with an intrigue for unique voices. She's a former associate artist of Blacklit Theater Company, Talawa, and she continues to perform both nationally and internationally. She was nominated for South Bank Sky Arts Breakthrough Award in 2018 and was recently awarded the Firecracker Photographic Grant in 2020. So thank you, Heather and Anika. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you both.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to talk to Heather today. We are really excited to have your work at the Mead Art Museum. We've acquired 9 prints, 9 images. And so hopefully we can talk about that, but also talk about your other work, your forthcoming work. One of the things that stands out, right, in your bio is an emphasis on kind of mental health. So I want to start the actual conversation by asking, how are you doing in this moment?
What a gorgeous question. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Anika. Oh, how am I doing? I'm doing all right, actually. Yeah. I think I'm accepting the wave that we're on. So I'm just kind of riding it. That whole kind of feeling of loss of control can feel quite disorientating, but I'm just kind of getting used to the lefts and the rights of it all. So I'm feeling okay. How are you doing, Anika?
I'm doing okay today. So I have some warm or hot tea at this moment. I'm drinking that. And that's helping me feel a little bit better. But I'm doing well. I'm hanging in there. So one of the first things I just kind of want to mention or just get out in the open is we're in a very difficult time right now, right? We're experiencing a pandemic. We are in the midst of hyper-visible anti-Black violence and police brutality, not just in the United States, but across the world. And so, a lot of conversations in the context of art is we're thinking about how can art be a form of resistance, right? Or what's art's place in a moment like this, where there's so much going on, and people are trying to mobilize and come up with collective ways of resistance. So I wanted to hear from you as an artist, as a performer, and to just hear you talk a little bit about how you see art in this very specific moment we're in right now. What do you see as its place, its function, How are you thinking about your own art practice?
Gosh, that's a fantastic question. I've been pondering that for the last 7 months, if I'm honest, and feeling a level of powerlessness, if I'm brutally honest, initially, because I felt like, people are actually dying, and what can my practice actually do? But realizing when my recent project that was released, I think maybe 2 weeks before George Floyd was murdered. And then suddenly I had a whole bunch of attention onto my work.
Mm.
And the New York Times, like massive organizations would contact me about my work. And I kind of started to see kind of the soft power of using your voice. That might sound quite cliche, but actually feeling a level of responsibility and the power of me being absolutely truthful and authentic in that moment. I think Anika, before, if I'm honest, I would be quite careful of what I would say to kind of mainstream organizations, kind of not to rock the boat, but also
Mhm.
trying to kind of like stay in my lane, I guess. But when what happened, I felt that, I don't know, there was kind of like a sense of kind of freedom and uh, there's a spotlight on me right now. So let me try to hold people accountable. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think visibility, I've always kind of shied away from it explicitly in terms of me being Heather, not an artist, but just be me using my voice. But that spotlight is a powerful tool, and I'm trying to kind of utilize it in that moment. And also, I think art you can talk about quite complex things and have
Yeah.
this kind of visceral response to images. You can talk for half an hour, but have one image and it can say that same thing, right? So that it sounds cliche, but kind of debate and conversation can really be utilized in the image. So just seeing how powerful that work speaks to people without needing words, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so can you link that, right? So this new kind of found feeling of responsibility, it can both be freeing and it can be heavy,
Yeah.
right? I wonder if you could talk about that feeling in relationship to the image that we have on the screen here. So it's called The Missing Chapter, Black Chronicles 2, and the importance of the archive.
Ooh, okay. So this image was taken pretty early on in my practice, how it looks now in terms of me being using my body in kind of all of my images.
Mhm.
And I stumbled across this gallery called Autograph ABP, which looks at um, photography and film and artists who were talking about identity representation. And this project, The Missing Chapter, was looking at the Black presence in Britain in the 19th century. And growing up, I didn't know that existed. I thought Black people came to Britain in the 60s and there was no presence of them at all. We were
Yeah.
often taught about, actually, we often talk about kind of African American history, and Black British history just didn't exist in our curriculum.
Mm.
Um, so this exhibition was kind of showcasing the legacy of Black people in Britain, and it just arrested me because it made me think about how significant visibility actually is, and it kind of was the catalyst for my practice. So this was kind of the start of everything, and things around kind of erasure and loss and trace. I think this people hadn't seen this archive for many years. It was kind of hidden in places. So that sort of discovery of legacy feels um, an act of resistance, but also an act of kind of like we are here, like a stamp of like significance and importance. And I think I felt quite lost before I kind of discovered this exhibition. I suddenly felt like there were people behind me as a Black British person. I've always tried to kind of default to kind of other parts of the diaspora, not actually my own. And this suddenly made me feel kind of seen and
Mm.
like there was a power behind me. That's how I felt.
That's wonderful. I mean, so what you're talking about, so I'm hearing a couple of different threads, and I want to bring those to the fore. You mentioned the kind of, well, I mentioned the freedom and the heaviness that's associated with um, feeling responsible or feeling as though your art can be used as a political intervention in this moment. And it makes me think of the phrase of kind of laying one's body on the line. And, you know, something you just mentioned in your last comment is that you use your body in your artwork, right? You're both a performer, you're a photographer. And I wanted to know what, if you could talk a little bit about what it means for your body to be an instrument of creative practice, what it means to use your body in these images. And here we're looking at Too Many Blackamoors, right? Where that's you in the photographs, and you talk about using your body in many or all of your images. Can you talk a little bit about why you made that decision as an artist and what that means for you?
Yeah, of course. I think the whole reason I became a visual artist was to help myself. I needed help, right? Um, I had no interest in becoming a photographer or an artist. I was an actor, I was doing that. And photography really was like a therapeutic tool to understand
Mm.
myself, right? I was at university in a terrible place and I just bought a camera and I was like, I need to just take pictures. I had no idea why. And then the images I would take were really around who I was as a Black woman, who I was as an African, who I was as this British kid in Kent, and everybody's white around me. So it was really a self discovery of the kind of like crap and negative beliefs I'd internalized because of what was surrounded around me. So my point of entry in photography was really about how can I start healing myself? What
Mm.
can I do?
Wow.
So all the work is like incredibly personal because it's not I never dreamed of like having my images shown around. That wasn't the reason I did it. It was like I need help. So
Mm.
the image now for me, the images, I cannot not be in it because I need to get something out of it. I need to get some sort of realization or discovery or something more truthful about me. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I'm always in the images, really.
Wow. That's amazing. And so as you look at the images now, are they still a source of a resource for you even as you look at them? So you talk about the practice, right? So it became a practice for you to help yourself. Is it still functioning in that way when you see these images? Do you still feel like they're a form of a resource for you?
Absolute to the point, Anika. It doesn't look for me. It doesn't look like me. And remember, my dad went to see the show, and he was like, "Who is this? Like, so who is this? Your friend?" And I was just like, "Dad, it's me." Like, it's so it's
Wow.
uncanny now. It feels like a moment, and I can remember what I was feeling, what I wanted to do, what those in Too Many Blackamoors, all of these props are a memory, like a traumatic memory I wanted to kind of wrestle with or deal with, which I need to say
Mhm.
is originally a concept I learned from an artist called Joe Spence and Rosie Martin, who coined this phrase called reenactment phototherapy, which kind of
Mm.
plainly was how can we find healing through photography, right? So they use props, they reimagine themselves as people, their mothers, whoever caused them kind of distress, to try to find some sort of alternative history to kind of rectify that moment. So I kind of use that loosely in these images. So yeah, I was going through a lot during that, and all of those props like tell a story. So for me, when I look at my images, Anika, it's like, wow, I did that. I processed that thing. I was, so it feels like
Yeah.
an evolution of myself, I think.
Wow, that is fascinating. Okay, so we have the Too Many Blackamoors on the screen now. And so, as I mentioned, the Meet has acquired 9 of these of your prints from this series, Too Many Blackamoors. Can you talk a little bit about these images? And I encourage folks who who can to visit the Mead and look at these images and to sit with them and think about the history. But I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the images for folks who might not know that much about this series.
Of course, Nika. So it started off, so the image prior, so I was in a kind of a collective from Autograph ABP, and they were looking at the history of Black Britain, yes, the history of Black Britons in the UK. And we went on this kind of 6 months course, and we were told to respond to an image in the archive. So I discovered this image of Sarah Forbes Bonetta, just just an insane story. So the woman on the left, right, look at me, the woman on the left, goodness me. So the story about her is that she was in a tribal conflict in Dahomey, and all her family were killed, and she was kept in this cage and given as a gift from the King of Gozo to Queen Victoria. What's written about her is that she was given as a gift from the King of the Blacks to the Queen of the Whites, and her name was Anin. That's from my research. Her name was Anin, and she was adopted essentially by Queen Victoria and grew up in the royal family, kind of hidden away. But she was essentially this princess, mad. But so that story just arrested me, and there was just a single small tiny carte de visite image in this archive that just blew me away. I've just never seen a dark-skinned woman in Britain looking like that, with that sort of poise.
Yeah.
But then I obsessed with her, right? But then I started researching about her, and she was described in this kind of she was very strong, she was very powerful, she was outspoken, and it felt quite jarring to me, because it felt like these are the ways people often describe dark-skinned women as strong, powerful, kind of this kind of impenetrable
superhuman.
Yes,
Yeah, superhuman. Yeah,
absolutely. During that time, Anika, even though I was struggling with mental health since I was 19, I was traveling around Europe, and I had kind of the worst racist attacks I've ever had before. And I was talking to my friend about the experience. I've never spoken to her about it before. And I said, do you ever, when you're going traveling, do you ever Google if the place is racist? And she was like, yeah. And we've never spoken about that, Anika. And we just burst out in tears and thought, gosh, we really want to tell each other that we're strong. We don't want to show that we're vulnerable and fragile. And then I was like, okay, can I use Sarah as a template for me to express kind of my own vulnerabilities? I've never spoken about my mental health publicly. It's always kind of been a secret. So I use Sarah's, because obviously Sarah was brought up as a princess in Dahomey and then brought to England. So many things happened to her. She actually died from tuberculosis. As soon as she went to England, she developed a cough. And when she came back to where she went to a hot country and she was fine, but when she came back to England, she developed this cough, and the cough became tuberculosis. Just there's a whole thing about what happens to Black bodies when they're in kind of different conditions, and those conversations were happening. So yeah, she became a template to kind of express my own issues around traveling around Europe and the kind of fragility with Black mental health, Black female mental health. So that's kind of where it all started from.
Yeah, and so you are, I mean, these photographs make me think about the kind of history of Black portraiture, right? And it's in the canon and the history of art. Can you say a little bit about how you're using portraiture as a form in these images, and also how you're challenging or undermining portraiture as well?
Yeah. So I think during the time when these carte de visites, the original carte de visites were taken, I guess they were reserved for kind of wealthier people with access. But it felt like there was a lack of agency around whose gaze is this for, right? Even the way sometimes people are posing, there is a air of kind of like this kind of British kind of stiff upper lip poisonous that I kind of wanted to deconstruct and say, what would it look like if it was my lens and I could do anything with my body. The image on the right, just by having her legs open wide, like those gestures would be quite radical
Yeah.
at that point. So I was thinking
Yeah.
about agency as a subject, but also as the maker. What does that look
Mm.
like? Because for me, Anika, growing up, I felt like I had no agency. I felt the images
Yeah.
I was consuming as like a young girl were telling me to act in this certain way. I had no freedom of my expression. So I really wanted to
Mhm.
explore what that looked like if the reins were totally in my hands. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. So you had to do quite a bit of research, right, to do this project, right? You had to go into the archives, and we've talked a little bit about the silences that are in the archives, right, around Black people, and how we have to reimagine archives or reimagine archival research, and what to make of those silences. Can you talk a little bit about how research plays into your artistic practice, how important it is, how you use it, um, yeah, its place in your practice.
Oh goodness me. I can be quite obsessed actually. Bundles and bundles of research. I think it's just come from growing up not having any access. I feel like I
Mhm.
just want to consume as much information as possible. But like you said, Anika,
Yeah.
there are so many silences. I think that's where the reimagination idea comes from. What happens
Right.
when there are those silences? Do we just leave it and move on? No. What if we can insert ourselves in the narrative and kind of bring those stories to life, right?
Mhm.
The thing with the missing chapter was that so many things were buried, um, or labeled incorrectly, or there was a stunning image of Sarah, but it wasn't even named as Sarah. It was named as another name, which could easily be lost. I think people sometimes they just devalued images of black bodies, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
they wouldn't
Yes.
categorize them correctly. So that's always been a difficult for me in my research. So often I tend to work with institutions who can have access to those collections, because often
Mhm.
you get nothing. You know that the information's there, but you get to a certain point and there's nothing. So often you have to kind of negotiate with so-called gatekeepers to get this information, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one way that I try to um, fill those silences, at least in my own courses, is I'm linking print culture, novels, as alongside visual culture.
Mm.
And so, I have students think about images, your images, images on book covers, photographs, all kinds of images in relationship to fiction and also nonfiction, right? So critical essays as well.
Mm.
And you and I talked briefly about using Black women's literature and critical essays in your practice, right? In our practice. And one of the texts that came up was Bell Hooks' 1994 book, Sisters of the Yam, Black Women in Self-Recovery.
Yeah.
And so there's one quote I just want to read from that text, and just to get a sense of, how you think about this quote, because it was one of the texts that you draw from that inspired you, right?
Mm.
And so I just want to read a quote from the text, and then we can talk about its relationship to the work as a way to fill silences, as a way to amplify ideas and concepts. So she writes, quote, "No level of individual self-actualization alone can sustain the marginalized and oppressed. We must be linked to collective struggle, to communities of resistance that move us outward into the world." End quote. So that's from her 1994 book, Sisters of the Yam. So for folks out there who might not know it, I encourage you to pick it up and check it out. But I wonder if you could talk about how community, how collective action or collaboration for you as an artist helps move your practice forward out into the world, right? Because we have this image of the artist as a kind of isolated figure, a genius in the room, right? In an attic, perhaps, toiling away and not kind of being in conversation with other folks or doing collaboration. So can you talk a little bit about collective struggle, communities of resistance? Like how does collaboration play into your practice?
Man, I think it's really everything. I think that I even see the archival images I use as collaborators.
Mm.
You know,
Mhm.
there is, maybe this is a cheeky thing to say, but I feel like sometimes with my generation there is a erasure of kind of people before them. It feels like everything is new,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And all of these, all of our ideas or ways or practices feel like completely original without acknowledging like everybody before. So I've got kind of an obsession with
Mm.
collaborating with kind of older um, kind of Black British artists, seeking advice, seeking mentorship,
Mhm.
but also being quite specific in my experience to make it feel universal. I think before Anika, I felt like I had to talk about all Black women are doing this and all Black women are doing that, which sometimes could be the case. But I think
Mm.
sometimes when I'm specific in my experience, it feels more, for some reason, it feels more relatable. And I'm
Mm.
always, I think the burden of community can um, sometimes stifle you in what you make because you're kind of thinking about what do I want to make, but also what's important for the wider community. But I think when you start from the personal, it I don't know, it feels like it's breaking this sort of monolith idea of our community and show and the kind of our individual approaches feels it's important for the kind of community narrative of who we are as like Black women, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm constantly talking to my peers about ideas and having kind of safe spaces. Now it's all on Zoom, but now I can talk to people from all over the place and
Mm.
about what's kind of we're going through. And I spoke to you about this, what's happening in the UK and what's
Yeah.
happening in America, and those sort of conversations which feel kind of flattened sometimes when they're on social media or whatever, and trying to have spaces of just real um, I don't know, debate and conversation is definitely central to my work. Absolutely. Yeah, I think I would be doing these women a disservice if I didn't do that.
Yeah. And what about writing and text? And it could be fiction, music, visual art. What in those forms are inspiring you in this moment or have inspired you in the past? Or
I'm,
poetry, yeah.
what am I? I went to see an exhibition. It's Nigerian American artist Toyin Oje Odutola.
Yeah, we've got them here, yeah.
Oh my goodness, like a bomb. So obviously the restrictions here are crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but their exhibition was at the Barbican, just like half an hour from my house. It was
Mhm.
the what was it called? Countervailing theory, I think it's called. Just
Mhm.
beautiful black and white pieces,
Yeah.
just like a balm. Like it felt like a breath of fresh air. It was just stunning piece of work. So yeah, Zanelli Mahuli is coming. Hope I pronounced their name correctly. Is coming to the Tate next month, which Anika, I'm just buzzing about. Just the some of the work kind of crosses over mine in terms of self-portraiture and conversation around vulnerability. So yeah, in terms of visual art, I'm an actor too, so I have to say I May Destroy You. I mean that
Ah, yes.
program
Yes. Yes.
just
Yeah.
I don't have the words, but that was utterly inspirational and actually is kind of inspiring a performance piece I'm doing
Oh.
next month. So yeah, I think right now, Anika, I feel like I'm not at output, I'm at input
Mm.
mode where I'm just feeding myself with art, culture, reading, listening to beautiful music, having conversations.
Yeah.
Because there's so much focus on the output, right? But like you definitely need input. And I can only make like one, maybe two projects a year because I need so much input to
Mm.
kind of create the work
Mm.
and seeing the value in that. Because sometimes you feel like having a conversation isn't helping me shoot this project, but it actually is, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have like a routine? Like once you're finished with the project, you go into input mode after each project, or how does that kind of routine work for you as a
Well,
creative?
the blessing of being kind of a multidisciplinary artist, I jump to another mode of creation. So I would just say, I'm going to act now. I want to be in a play. Is there anything else coming up? So I can kind of jump to that. Or now I'm exploring kind of performance and dance. So I'm like, can I jump to that?
Okay.
That seems really beneficial to me.
Okay. So that keeps the kind of creative energy going as you work.
Yes, very much
Yeah.
so.
Okay. Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit about your forthcoming projects or things you're working on, things you're thinking about? You talked a little bit about it throughout our conversation, but I want folks to get a sense of, what to look for as you create for the future.
Yes. So this current project is called Wish You Were Here, which was inspired by an African American performer, vaudeville performer called Aida Overton Walker, who just blew me away. So a bit of background before. So this project was birthed from a time where I was struggling with really deep anxiety. All the work often starts with
Yeah.
something happening to me. And um, I discovered her because I found out about the word cakewalk like a year and a half ago. And cakewalk is a parody of um, African American enslaved people created a parody of white society. At the time, it was of slave masters, and then it became kind of white society. And that dance was kind of moved into kind of minstrel shows and became this kind of a bleak way of looking at blackness. Something people white society often laughed about or uh, ridiculed kind of black bodies on stage. But Aida kind of came in, got this dance and reimagined it with kind of elegance, grace, artistry. She was highly acclaimed for her skill and wanted to really like challenge this idea of kind of limited embodiments of blackness on stage. She was very outspoken about that. Um, like, so I read this quote and I just thought, this is who I need to kind of reimagine. So the quote is, unless we learn the lesson of self-appreciation and practice it, we shall spend our lives imitating other people and appreciating ourselves. She said that in 1901. Like, what? It just, I couldn't believe that. And she's very much utilized her voice in kind of in press, in interviews. She was very outspoken about these kind of limiting embodiments that she felt that she had to be part of, but also wanted to kind of rub up against.
Mhm.
So that was the beginning of this project. So it kind of looks at what Heather would look like if she kind of fought against this kind of imposter syndrome. What would happen if I took up space? So it's kind of using some stories inspired by Overton Walker's life with my own. So it's kind of the mesh of the two. So the image on the right, Aida actually got invited to Buckingham Palace to teach the royal family the cakewalk, which is just feels so subversive and juicy because she's kind of teaching them their own dance. And yeah, all of the images kind of are about my own life, but also kind of chime with hers. So that's the latest project, really.
Oh wow. This is fascinating. This is amazing. Can you talk? I mean, so as an artist and a performer, I'm sure you're thinking, in very meticulous ways about the clothing, the dress, the costumes. And in this image, there's so much going on, right? We have the parasol, we have the crown. Can you talk a little bit about your choices here as an artist and what you were thinking as you created this image?
Of course. So a lot of in kind of 1901 to 1903, that was kind of the height of the cakewalk.
Mhm.
And there were these postcards which were created of cakewalk dancers.
Mhm.
some of them are beautiful, some of them are great, but a lot of them were grotesque and kind of just awful images, actually, really. So I wanted to kind of do the similar thing, which with Blackamoors, kind of create an agency, but also I wanted these cards, these kind of postcards, to be these kind of self-care postcards, these kind of empowering things people can kind of post to their friends or kind of uplift people, right? So the first one's about kind of subversion, and I was thinking about, so the name of the piece is called Rob This England, and it's kind of this thing that British Black Twitter created. The phrase Rob This England basically means reparations now. That's what it means. So it felt like I was using this kind of esoteric coded language to kind of encourage my community without other people knowing what we were saying. Because I think when I entered museums growing up, I felt like people were using this kind of convoluted, verbose language, and I couldn't get access to what these images were saying. So how can I kind of use that same system to kind of empower my community? So a lot of it's kind of satirical. Her gesture is kind of like, well, hey, if you're expecting me to teach you a dance that I'm basically copying from you, then hey. So it was kind of this kind of taking back power, I guess. And it was a reference to the Buckingham Palace kind of meeting of teaching them the dance. Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot going on in me.
Oh, wow. One other thing that I talk about, so I teach a class on popular culture. And one of the things we talk about in that class is how, right now there's the TV show The Crown. There's also the show Victoria. Are you paying attention to those shows? Because I mean, there's a way in which we can have a really interesting conversation about the relationship between these images and the kind of narrative that they are creating on those shows. Are you paying it? Do you pay it to popular culture? Are these things you're thinking about as you create these images?
The Crown. I mean, this country is the UK is quite divided on that show. I don't know. I mean, popular culture in general, for sure. But with these images, maybe not so much. But I'm interested in what your question is, because it sounds really interesting. So yeah, could you elaborate a bit?
I could see how your images could be an intervention or overturning the kind of narrative at play in those shows, right? I mean, they're definitely showing some blemishes in neo-colonial ways of thinking about England, but also showing a lot of like, look how great we are. Look how we, helped people of color. There is also some of that, and so your images too many Blackamoors and Wish You Were Here kind of intervene into that narrative and disrupt some of what's going on in those shows.
Okay, that's a great.
So that's what I'm thinking of.
No, that's great. I think the British take on race or racism is very Houdini. Like it's like someone stole my watch, and I'm like, "Where's my watch?" And everyone's like, "What are you talking about? What watch? I don't understand what you mean." There's such a kind of shame around the empire that only now, for me, in my lifetime, in the last maybe 5 or 10 years, people are having honest conversations about empire. Like I said, Anika, I've never heard of that before. British people were doing great stuff. Abolition. I've never heard about any links with the kind of Middle Passage, Caribbean. That's all my own research, And like I said before, it was kind of like that happened in America. We weren't part of that. That was really the narrative growing up, So I definitely feel like I'm trying to right some sort of wrong, or just understanding that it's that thing about like our history is British history. Like what's going on is not Black history. This is British history. The empire is part of the legacy of who Britain is, right? So I feel like that sort of, not resentment, but that frustration of that late discovery of that legacy, it feels like it's always feeding in my work. Definitely. Even the roles I take, like, I always feel like I'm trying to highlight something or combat something, right? So yeah, definitely. That's a really great observation. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the way in which even Meghan Markle is disrupting the very clean, neat narrative about empire right now. So I'm thinking about all of those things kind of all together. So this, this has been wonderful, and so it's time. It looks like it's time Q&A right now, and I'm sure that people have lots of amazing questions about your work, about your craft. So I guess we will open it up now. Is that right, Danielle?
Yes, we can open up for questions, and folks should feel free to chat at me. I have Amherst staff in my name, or by now the chat should be activated. You should be able to type in if you have any questions that you'd like to ask. In the meantime, I can also keep showing some of these amazing images to folks who haven't been able to see them yet in person in the galleries due to COVID. They really are remarkable. And the display is, I think we have 9 of them, 3 rows of 3 are displayed in the galleries altogether. So it's really, really amazing.
Yeah. Is there ever a way in which your role as a performer is in tension with your role as a photographer, right? So I can see the way in which they're working together, right? So as a performer, as an actress, and then that informing the work as of you being a photographer and thinking about these photographs, these images. Is there ever a way in which you see these things in tension with one another in your practice?
Gosh, yeah, I think all the time.
Mm.
I'll do like a bunch of research for like 7 months, and the research will consist of obviously looking at the archive, but
Yeah.
also what's happening with me. What do I want to say? Do you know what I mean? What do I want to discover? And I think when I first started taking the images, I was like, am I performing for someone? Is this a performance?
Wow.
So during these kind of sessions of taking the work, I'm talking at and my assistant, or I'm reading a diary entry. So it all has to be, it can't be an act, or there's no point of me doing this. So
Yeah.
I remember in the image on the right, my Angela Dennis and Adelaide Bannerman, they were with me in the room. One woman, a curator, and another photographer, and they were reading out my diary and saying things which happened to me at the time, for me to really conjure up something. I really wanted to experience something, because during those times of those kind of racist attacks which are were happening to me, I could never respond. It would happen and I'd be in shock, and I'd say, I wish I said this, I wish I did this thing. And in that moment on the right, it felt like the image was like, this is what I would have done if I could have said this to their face. This is how I would have stood. This is what, do you know what I mean? This is what I would have felt in my body.
Wow.
So now I found to rectify myself not performing, which is very easy for me to do, I need something, there has to be a real trigger or provocation, something I want to get out of it. So that's kind of how I combat that.
Wow. I never would have guessed that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you all for attending this program, making time to join us on this Tuesday. I guess it's Tuesday afternoon. We really appreciate you making space for art and joining us. Heather and Anika, thank you both for such an insightful and marvelous conversation filled with great images and art. Heather, thank you for making this and sharing it with us. You know, it's rooted in really painful stuff, and you've just created wonderful and inspiring work from it. And I know it's really inspiring for our students and our audiences to hear from you and to be able to experience your work even through Zoom. So thank you.
No, I'm really grateful. Thank you for everyone who attended. It's great to be in a space with people and conversate about this. So thank you. And Anika, it was just a joy. Thank you for having a chat with me.
Oh, you were a joy too. Thank you for, I mean, I've mentioned it before, but your images are beautiful. I think the conversation was inspiring for me. So thank you for joining us.